The Casino de Monte Carlo pulsed with an energy that was both alluring and dangerous, a siren song for the wealthy and the reckless. James Bond, ever the picture of effortless cool, surveyed the scene from beneath heavy-lidded eyes, a wry smile playing on his lips. Tonight, however, the stakes were higher than usual, the whispers of danger more pronounced. The roulette wheel spun, a blur of red and black, as Bond casually raked in his winnings. A subtle vibration against his wrist, a barely perceptible hum from the miniature receiver concealed within his cufflink, told him everything he needed to know. The message, delivered with the precision of a Swiss watchmaker, was brief, urgent rendezvous point. Rooftop terrace, midnight. Bond's fingers tightened around the chips in his hand, a flicker of steel in his eyes. He excused himself from the table, his movements fluid and deliberate, and made his way through the throng of revelers. Every instinct told him he was being watched, but he gave no outward sign, his face an impassive mask. As he stepped out onto the balcony, the cool night air washing over him, Bond couldn't shake the feeling that he was stepping into the jaws of a trap, Bond leaned against the railing, his silhouette a dark shadow against the glittering backdrop of Monte Carlo. He checked his watch, 11:58 p.m. A soft rustle behind him announced the arrival of his contact, a woman whose name he didn't know and whose face was shrouded in the shadows. "You're late," Bond said, his voice a low murmur that was barely audible above the wind. "Punctuality is the thief of time," the woman replied, her voice a husky whisper that sent a shiver down his spine. He turned, his eyes adjusting to the darkness, and found himself looking at a woman who could have stepped straight out of a spy thriller. She was tall and athletic, with piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through him. Her dark hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail, revealing the elegant line of her neck. "I trust you have something for me," Bond said, holding out his hand. The woman smiled, a slow, predatory smile that sent a surge of adrenaline coursing through his veins. "Impatient, Mr. Bond," she purred, placing a small metallic device in his palm. "This is bigger than we thought. Be careful out there, 007. Lives are at stake." He barely had time to process her words before the first gunshot shattered the night. The woman crumpled to the ground, a dark stain blooming on her dress. Bond, his reflexes honed from years of deadly encounters, dove for cover just as a second shot ricocheted off the railing where he had been standing. He rolled, coming up in a crouch, his Walther PPK already drawn. "Show yourselves!" he roared, his voice echoing across the rooftops. His answer came in the form of two more figures, emerging from the shadows like predators stalking their prey. They were dressed in black tactical gear, their faces hidden behind ski masks, their movements swift and silent. Bond knew this was no random attack. He was being hunted. He fired off 2 shots, the sharp cracks of gunfire splitting the night. One of the assailants grunted and went down, clutching his shoulder. The other, unfazed, returned fire, forcing Bond to retreat further onto the rooftop. Spotting a narrow gap between the buildings, he sprinted towards it, his heart pounding in his chest. He launched himself across the chasm, his body a blur of motion, and landed on the opposite rooftop with a thud that knocked the wind out of him. The tram screeched to a halt as Bond landed heavily on its roof, his muscles screaming in protest. He scrambled to his feet, his heart still racing from the adrenaline rush of the chase. He had bought himself some time, but he knew his pursuers wouldn't be far behind. Ducking into the shadows, he made his way through the crowded tram, his eyes scanning the faces around him. He could feel their gazes on him, curious, questioning. He was a jarring sight, his tuxedo torn and bloodied, his face etched with the strain of the chase, but no one dared to ask questions. He slipped off the tram just as it pulled away from the curb, melting into the throng of pedestrians on the sidewalk. He needed a new mode of transportation, and he needed it now. His eyes fell on a sleek silver Aston Martin parked across the street, its engine purring like a contented cat. Perfect. But first he had a score to settle. The trail led to a modern art gallery, a stark, minimalist space filled with abstract sculptures and unsettling installations. The Aston Martin roared to life, its engine a guttural growl that echoed through the empty streets. Bond, behind the wheel, pushed the car to its limits, the speedometer needle climbing steadily as he weaved through the late-night traffic. He could see the headlights of his pursuers gaining on him in the rearview mirror, their engines screaming like banshees. He slammed his foot down on the accelerator, the car surging forward with a burst of speed that pinned him back in his seat. The wind howled past him, whipping his hair across his face as he navigated the winding coastal highway with precision born of instinct and years of experience. "Time for a little surprise," he muttered to himself, his fingers dancing across the dashboard. He pressed a button and the sleek silver car transformed, its chassis extending, wheels morphing into high-speed treads. The Aston Martin, now more tank than car, ploughed through the guardrail, soaring through the air before landing with a bone-jarring thud on the beach below. The roar of the plane's engine was deafening, vibrating through Bond's teeth as he gripped the parachute straps. Below him, the island fortress loomed out of the mist, a forbidding silhouette against the stormy sky. It was a place of secrets, a haven for criminals and madmen, and it was his job to infiltrate it, to dismantle the organization from the inside out. He checked his equipment one last time: grappling hook, silenced pistol, miniature explosives disguised as cufflinks, each item a testament to Q Branch's ingenuity. His eyes lingered on the last item, a small, innocuous-looking pen that doubled as a high-powered laser. He smiled grimly. Q always did have a flair for the dramatic. The plane dipped low, buffeted by the wind, and Bond took a deep breath, steeling himself for the jump. This was it, no turning back. He launched himself out of the plane and into the abyss, the wind screaming in his ears as he plummeted towards the earth. He fought the urge to deploy his parachute too early, knowing that every second he stayed in freefall brought him closer to his target, undetected. He landed with a soft thud on the rain-slicked grass, his body rolling to absorb the impact. The fortress was a labyrinth of steel and concrete, its corridors patrolled by armed guards and monitored by surveillance cameras. But Bond moved with the grace